Robert Newton Ford was a wiry young boy who grew up admiring Jesse James's daring exploits and finally met him in 1880. With Jesse's gang depleted by arrests, deaths, and defections by the spring of 1882, Jesse believed he could only rely on the Ford brothers. Jesse invited the Fords to participate in the robbery of the Platte City Bank in Missouri in order to keep the gang alive, but the brothers had already planned to collect the $10,000 bounty placed on Jesse James by Governor Thomas T. Crittenden. On April 3, 1882, Robert Ford shot Jesse James in the back of the head. However, this would ironically be his demise as well. Welcome back. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Past Crimes channel and leave us a comment below to let us know what's your thoughts at the end of this video. Robert Ford, the youngest of 7 siblings, was born in Ray County, Missouri, in 1862 to James Thomas and Mary Bruin Ford. Robert admired Jesse James as a young man for his Civil War record and criminal exploits, eventually meeting him in 1880 at the age of 18. On September 7, 1881, Robert's brother Charlie is believed to have participated in the James Younger Gang's Blue Cut train robbery in Jackson County, west of Glendale, Missouri, renamed Tulsa and now part of Independence. Jesse moved his family to St. Joseph, Missouri, in November 1881 after the train robbery with the intention of giving up crime. By that time, the James gang had shrunk significantly, some had fled the gang in fear of prosecution, and many of the original members were either dead or in prison following a botched bank robbery in Northfield, Minnesota. Following the train robbery, Jesse's brother Frank James decided to retire from crime and relocated to Lynchburg, Virginia. On December 4, 1881, 2 James gang members, Wood Hite and Dick Little, on the run from the law, took refuge in the home of Martha Bolton, Robert Ford's widowed sister. Hite and Little were both attracted to Martha and clashed over their rivalry. The conflict culminated in an argument during which both drew their guns and shot at each other repeatedly, where Little was hit once in the leg and Hite was hit in the arm. During the battle, Robert drew his gun and shot Hite once in the head. He died about 15 minutes later. Robert and his brother Charlie then buried Hite in an unmarked grave. With his gang depleted by arrests, deaths, and defections by the spring of 1882, Jesse believed he could only rely on the Ford brothers. Charlie Ford had previously gone on raids with Jesse, but Robert was a fresh face. There is no record of Robert Ford participating in any of the James gang robberies, and he was thought to be mostly a hanger-on, doing odd jobs and possibly holding the horses while the others committed the crime. The Fords lived in St. Joseph with the James family, where Jesse went under the alias Thomas Howard. Jesse invited the Fords to participate in the robbery of the Platte City Bank in Missouri in order to keep the gang alive, but the brothers had already decided not to participate in order to collect the $10,000 bounty placed on Jesse by Governor Thomas T. Crittenden. Robert Ford and gang member Dick Little surrendered to Sheriff James Timberlake in Ray County in January 1882 at their sister Martha Bolton's house. They were summoned to a meeting with Crittenden because they had been in the presence of Jesse's cousin, Wood Hite, on the day Hite was murdered. Crittenden promised Ford a full pardon if he killed Jesse, who was the most wanted criminal at the time. Crittenden had made apprehending the James brothers his top priority, declaring in his inaugural address that no political motivations could be allowed to keep them from justice. He had turned to the railroad and express corporations to put up a $5,000 bounty for the delivery of each of them and an additional $5,000 for the conviction of either of them because he could not offer a sufficiently large reward under the law. On April 3, 1882, by reading the daily newspaper, Jesse had just learned of gang member Little's confession for participating in Hite's murder and grew increasingly suspicious of the Fords for never reporting this matter to him. According to Robert Ford, it was clear to him that Jesse knew they were there to betray him. Instead of arguing the Fords, Jesse walked across the living room and placed his revolvers on a sofa. He turned around and noticed a dusty picture above the mantel, so he climbed onto a chair to clean it. When Robert Ford drew his gun, he shot Jesse in the back of the head. Following the murder, the Fords contacted Crittenden to claim their reward. They turned themselves into authorities, only to be charged with first-degree murder. The Ford brothers were indicted, pleaded guilty, and sentenced to death by hanging all in one day, but Crittenden granted them a full pardon 2 hours later. The public turned against the Fords for betraying their gang leader, and Robert was viewed as a coward and traitor for murdering Jesse. This sentiment clashed with the general public opinion at the time of Jesse's death, which held that Jesse should be stopped by any means necessary. Robert made money for a time by posing for photographs as the man who killed Jesse James in dime museums. He also appeared on stage with his brother Charlie in a touring stage show reenacting the murder. Charlie committed suicide on May 4, 1884, while terminally ill with tuberculosis and addicted to morphine. Soon after, Robert Ford and Dick Little moved to Las Vegas, New Mexico, and established a saloon. During the Lincoln County War, Robert allegedly engaged in a shooting contest with Jose Chavez y Chavez, a comrade in arms of Billy the Kid. Robert was defeated in the competition and left town. On December 26, 1889, Robert survived an attempt on his life in Kansas City, Kansas, when an assailant tried to slit his throat. Robert eventually settled in Colorado, where he opened a saloon and gambling house in Walsenburg. When silver was discovered in Creede, Robert shut down his saloon and opened another saloon there. Robert bought a lot, and on May 29, 1892, opened Ford's Exchange, which was said to be a dance hall. 6 days later, a major fire destroyed the entire business district, including Ford's Exchange. Robert erected a tent saloon to operate from temporarily until his former establishment could be rebuilt. On June 8, 1892, 3 days after the fire, Edward O'Kelly entered Robert's tent saloon armed with a shotgun. Robert's back was turned, according to witnesses. O'Kelly said, "Hello, Bob," and fired both barrels as Robert turned to see who it was, killing him instantly. O'Kelly became the man who killed Jesse James and never explained why he committed the murder. O'Kelly was sentenced to life in prison, but his sentence was later reduced to 18 years. He ended up serving only about 9 years at the Colorado State Penitentiary before being released due to, first, a 7,000 signature petition in his favor, and, second, a medical condition. However, on January 13, 1904, O'Kelly was killed while attempting to shoot a police officer.